Okay, so if you've been following through with the Elastic Container Service videos that we've just kind of done, we've just kind of published 483, basically hands-on on how to create the private repo and push the image to the private repo. So if you look back at our private repo here, um, you can sort of see that this was our repo here. It's private. It's basically got one image that's basically um, part of that repo now. So if you've got to this far, I mean, you've actually done really, really well because you've learned a little bit about Docker, you've learned a little bit about um, ECR, you know, but the biggest kind of part here is actually only to come because what we need to do now is we need somehow to get this image into a cluster. So we need to take this image and put it into some type of cluster. And again, a cluster is just a kind of way to kind of, group your containers so you have some resources that you can basically run your container in rather than having to do it on the command line, which we were kind of doing here. So you remember, we were kind of running the actual, running the image on this Docker using Docker because this machine, for example, our machine here, this is not going to be online. So we have to now, we had to tag the image and then basically push it up to the repo so that we actually have it. So now we have it in a repo. What can we do with it? So what we can basically do with it is to run it in a cluster. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, here's the end result. Here's basically what we're basically looking for. So welcome to my AWS ECS demo project. So this is the date and time um, that we kind of saw before. So this is the project that we're basically looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bring you back on how I kind of put that image into ECS. And let's kind of take it a step back. But this is the end kind of product of what you were basically looking for. So first thing we'd actually have to do is we'd have to create a cluster here. So I created a cluster here. So all I kind of did was, and you can sort of see all of the kind of the green notices here, but basically all I did was I went in and kind of create a cluster, and I gave them a cluster name, and I left this optional, and I sort of said, okay, use AWS Fargate, so use serverless. So I mean, there is an option here that you can use EC2 instances if you have them, and external instances if you have some on-prem. But basically that was all I did, and I clicked on create. And what that basically does is it stands you up a new cluster here. So after a few minutes, you'll basically get a notification to sort of say that your cluster has been successfully created. That was easy. Okay. The next thing I actually had to do um, was go in, and I just want to kind of point out something here quickly. When you basically create a cluster here, because this is a type of Kubernetes infrastructure, basically what happens is you actually get a namespace associated. So if I deleted that cluster here, that namespace ID would also get deleted. But I'm not sure if you kind of, you've studied anything regarding Kubernetes before, but if you don't know about kind of namespaces, definitely kind of have a look in Kubernetes because again, Kubernetes world is massive to the world right now. So if I kind of go into task definitions, the next kind of thing I did was here is I created a task definition. So I sort of said, okay, so create me a new task definition here. This is what I did. I went in, I gave it a name. I went in and I sort of said, okay, use AWS Fargate. That's definitely what I want to do. Use the operating system here, Linux, 8664. Network zone, you can read here about the actual network zones and everything. I just left it as AWS VPC for the moment. I went in here and I basically just changed this to be like a half V CPU and just the memory I kind of left. Here, what I did was I also said, I want to use the execution role here. So, I want to kind of use the execution role, which is fine here. because this basically has the permissions that's required to run that to execute this container. Then basically I went in and I sort of said, okay, so I want that, I want that. The image URI, where did I get that from? Very simply, I kind of opened another um, tab here, and I went over to this copy URI field here. So I just went in here, click on the kind of the copy URI, clicked on that because this is where our image went to before, and basically that will give me my URI. I put that in here. I sort of said, yes, this is an essential container because basically there's only one of it right now. Here I specified port 80 and the protocol TCP, and I gave the port a name. Again, it was kind of like what we were kind of basically doing in the Docker version previously. Added any profile. I left that. Um, I kind of went down then, and I went down here, and I went down. Storage was okay. So I think that was. Let me see. That was all I basically. That was all I basically did. Um, that was all I basically did for this to set this up. Then I clicked on OK. Now the task execution role. This is the one that will kind of get you most likely, than all of them. Like the execution role here, you can sort of see here, it basically has two policies. It actually has two policies here. So you're going to have to make sure that this policy basically has the permissions to pull down that image from the um, from the repository, from the private repository that you basically specified. So this is exactly what I kind of did here. Um, I chose that execution row. I went in here, and I left that, and I just clicked on create. What happens is after a few minutes, you'll basically get your new task definition created. Now, the only other thing, you'd always have to be kind of careful is when you come down here, you can sort of see that the container here, just make sure that the port is correct here. So make sure that this is the internal port to the container, because you want the container port. So not the port that you're basically going to run, um, but it's the container port that you basically want and the protocol. So just kind of make sure that you basically have those kind of set. So that's what I kind of did then. And then the last thing of what I kind of did, so then I kind of have my task created here, you know. So I actually have my kind of task created here. You can kind of click into your task here. There was no services. There was a kind of a task here. Just because I kind of ran it a few minutes ago. Go in here. You sort of see the infrastructure that's going to use Fargate and Fargate Spot. The metrics, you can go into your metrics, schedule tasks and tags. Um, and that was basically all I actually had to do here. So that was kind of straightforward enough. So if I kind of go back into my task definitions here, I did my task, and here, I sort of said, okay, so what I want to do here is I want to um, deploy. So you can see my role is here. I want to deploy um, using this here. So I want to kind of run task. So when I kind of ran the task, basically what happened was it created me this task launched. So it created me this. So basically, kind of behind the scenes, what it's doing is it's running a task in your cluster, and this is the ID of the actual task. So that's basically what happened. And then I basically had like a kind of revision one task, um, so I can kind of go into, for example, task definitions, task definition, task definition here, and you could sort of see this would be the container, and this would be your image for your container. But so really, just to kind of summarize what we basically did, we created a cluster. The cluster was fairly easy to create. Created a task definition. Task definition was fairly easy to create, so that was kind of straightforward enough. And when I went to my task definition here, so when I actually went into revision 1 containers and I went to run task, the only thing I actually really kind of had to do here was make sure that, I created a new security group. So for example, I'm going to kind of show you now that if I kind of went into task definitions and the task and the revision, so it'll bring the revision 1 because this is the first time I'm basically doing this. You take the existing cluster, you sort of say the launch type is going to be this. It's going to be Fairgate, and it's going to be the latest, and it's going to be a task. Okay, and when it's a task, it basically picks up the task definition by default with the revision 1. Okay, I came down here, with the networking, I just chose everything that was selected here, so I didn't kind of change anything on my networking. So it's basically for HA, you definitely, it's advised that you basically have 3 subnets anyway in use. The only thing I did here was I sort of said create a new security group here. So I gave it a new kind of security group. I gave it a new kind of security group name. So I think I called it kind of container SG here. I gave some description, and here I said I want HTTP traffic, and the protocol comes up at TCP. The port range comes up at port 80. I said I want it to be from anywhere. So I want to allow anything. So this is an inbound rule for security groups. I sort of said I want, an inbound rule that allows any source, including my Mac, to be able to access this container on port 80. So that's probably where, that would probably be the biggest kind of catch that people may kind of, miss, that if this is not opening here, so if this URL did not open for me, even though it's an IP, if that did not open for you, probably the biggest thing is actually somehow you may have to kind of recheck your inbound rules for a security group. I just created a new kind of security group. I sort of said I want a new kind of security group because if I go over to security, I'm going to search for security groups, and it's part of EC2 feature, and it's part of VPC feature. Okay, so if I kind of go in here, you could and you should be able to see here's that container group that I basically contained it. So you sort of see it says container SG because it's Nginx security group. If I removed that, I probably wouldn't be able to access my website. So I'm going to do a little kind of small test here, but basically before I kind of do that and destroy this, because I'm going to pull all of this down anyway. That's kind of what I did here. So created a new security group. I called it that. I gave it a description. I made sure that the inbound rule for security group was HTTP, TCP, port 80, allow anywhere. So that was kind of critically important because when I was trying this earlier, it actually didn't work the first time because I didn't actually allow the firewall rule into my resource. And then I kind of just clicked on the create button down here. So what I can kind of do now is I can go back here to my task definition. So I kind of have task definitions. I have my cluster here. Now I have this here. Okay, so I'm kind of wondering right now if I go into my security groups here and I delete this because I'm going to remove all of this anyway. If I delete this here, if I can, let's sort of see, can I actually just delete this? It may just sort of say that I can't delete it because it's already kind of associated. Yeah, so you sort of see here it says it will not be deleted because it's actually associated with a running network interface associated. So it sort of says where's your network interface? It's basically running in your default. It's got the security group here. It's got the availability zone, but this security group is basically related to 126 here, 120, 90, 126, 90, 9126. So this is my public IP here that it's basically running. So that's why it's basically not allowing me to actually, and this is the account, but that's why it's basically not allowing me to actually delete that security group, because basically sort of says, well, you actually have something available to it, right? So if I go back into here, the first thing I want to do, and I want to kind of show you this kind of quickly, is let's start to pull down this, because I've kind of sort of seen around that they don't really kind of show you how to do that, how to actually pull this kind of all back down. So basically, the way you kind of pull this down correctly is you have to remove the task definitions first. So you remove that. So you click on that, click on actions, and deregister it first. So you see the way that the delete is kind of, you can't select it. But if I deregister this first, deregister, click on that. Right now, in my task definitions, I go back and I'm going to just do the same here for this one. Deregister, deregister. And you can sort of see here in the messages are kind of coming up that task 2, task 1, because I was kind of playing around earlier. But basically, if I kind of go in here, you sort of see there's no task definitions for that task definition now. You see here, there's no task definitions now. So here I can actually sort of say, okay, I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to leave those as they kind of are right now. I can click in here, but I might be able to, looks like I can't. If I go into cluster here, I'm going to delete my cluster. So I'm going to delete everything. So delete this cluster. I don't want anything to do with this kind of cluster. I don't want any kind of cost or anything kind of like that. So I'm going to let that delete. Oh, okay. So if I go to my task definitions, see here, cluster, tasks. Okay. I need to stop this first. So stop all selected tasks from running. Okay, so I've stopped selected tasks from running. So now I have no services, no tasks. The infrastructure is kind of exactly the same as it actually was, and I've no containers anymore. So if I go back to task definitions, now I don't have any task definitions. See that? They're all completely gone. So I'm just kind of making sure that I'm still in my zone. Here I can go to clusters. I can click in here. I can delete my cluster. So I can paste that in here again. Delete. And you'll sort of see that this time basically we've successfully deleted that cluster, because you want to make sure that, if I kind of go back into my clusters, I have no clusters now. If I go into namespaces, this will basically be removed in a few minutes. As that kind of cluster gets removed, this namespace should get removed. But keep an eye on that just to make sure it actually is removed after a certain time. It'll take a while, but it will be actually removed. Task definitions. I have no task definitions here. So I want to make sure that, I'm not leaving anything here that basically will, I'll get billed for or anything. Now if I go back in here, refresh my page, of course this doesn't work anymore because I've deleted my cluster. My application was running in my cluster's been deleted, so that's not running anymore. I want to, go back into my kind of security groups here. I want to sort of say, there's actually one or two kind of, security groups I want to delete here. Delete. I definitely want to delete this one. I want to delete. Okay, so it says it's just not being found, so it's already gone from the list. Let me see if I can just kind of clean up these a little bit. Delete security group. It won't be deleted. That can't be deleted because it's associated. This one I think was just something for testing as well. One group associated. I'm going to delete this because I actually don't need this anymore. Delete. Okay, so I'll basically have to kind of find out where that's kind of related to. But basically, kind of going back into my security groups, I basically don't have any security groups. If if I click here and just refresh here, I can sort of see that that container security group has actually been removed. So just kind of make sure that you kind of go back in and, delete everything. But basically, my website has gone offline because I don't have any, you know, if you just refresh that, you basically see it's actually gone offline. It just will never resolve. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one.